Ahora sí, estoy.
Okay. So basically, yeah. Basically, I will just give you a few slides to guide you on building your own configuration tomorrow. So basically, it will be exactly the same step that we had this morning, but I will insist on some change that you have to do in the different files and remind you where to change things. So first, step one is a prerequisite. You need to make the run the Benguela simulation. It's a very strong suggestion. As I said yesterday and this morning, I guess, this will allow you to check if the environment, the models, the libraries are correctly set up. So I strongly suggest you to do that. On Leftaru, here it's easy, but even when you go back to your own computer, I strongly suggest that you start with the Benguela configuration because we are sure that it's working. So basically, if it's not, it's that you have some setup to clarify on the environment and the model compilation. So also, I strongly suggest you to use the documentation. We made hard work preparing that. So if you go on the CROCO website, you have a tab that is on documentation. And in this documentation tab, you have a link towards the HTML documentation. So it's online documentation that you can find. And there are also the PDF of the same documentation if you want to work offline. And basically, this documentation looks like that. So there is a part for the general documentation of the model and a part with tutorials. So here, tutorials, it's a bit if you scroll down when you're on the main documentation page. And there is tutorial for coupling. So if you're lost somewhere on some steps, you can go there and you can see that there are summary steps for coupling, but also information for compiling the different models and the different libraries, and also the different steps to set up a couple configuration. So use this documentation. Then you can see that also on the documentation page of the website, there is a link towards training presentation. So what we generally put all the training presentations that we do on every summer school, so you can go back there. And we also provide the tutorial configuration, so you can download the file of this configuration and download the file for pre-processing this configuration from there. So this link actually, it gives you to this page, which is training. Actually, it's another tab that you can go directly. And if you scroll a bit down on that page, you will see that you have the regional configuration and you have all the files provided to run this Benguela configuration. So do not hesitate to use them. And we also provide some global files for the year 2013. It's a bit further down on this page that you can use to build your own configuration wherever you want. And this is this kind of file that you will use tomorrow. So everything is downloadable from the website, so do not hesitate to use that. And if you see that there is an error somewhere, please let us know so that we can correct, or if there's a broken link or something like that. So another thing that you can use if you're a bit lost when you're building your own configuration is a forum. We have a forum, so there is a tab also on the website that brings you to the forum. And in this forum, you can check first if anyone has the same issue than you, and maybe there is already an answer to that. And you can see that there is one, let's say, channel of discussion that is about coupling. So you can go there and check if there were questions. And then if you have any question, you can, and it's not answered already, you can ask some question there. And all the users can respond. And when it's about coupling, I receive emails every day when there is a question on the forum, so I try to answer them when I have time. So step 2, environment. So now you pretty well know the create config script. So you will need to run it again, but with a different name for your configuration. So basically, this is what you have done today with the Benguela, but with another name. Then you will have to set up the my path. Now, I'm pretty sure that you know also this script, but it's very important because this script is sourced at the beginning of every cooking toolbox script. So if there are mistakes in this script, nothing will work. And remember that you need to source it at each time you log back to the machine you're working on. Or you can source it in your bash RC if you want. But basically, you need to source it at the beginning of everything because it's setting up so modules, compilers, but also all these environment variables that are CPL, OC, waves, etc., which are used within the script. So check that. And then you will have to do the pre-processing. So today we didn't do that because I provided you the file to do the pre-processing, to where the pre-processing were done actually already. But basically, you can do it by yourself if you're used to the pre-processing of CROCO or of WaveWatch. But otherwise, you can also go into the pre-pro directory that is now in your new configuration that you have built. And then you can go into CROCO to prepare for CROCO. And there you can find, you have the usual CROCO tools param file that you can edit. And inside this CROCO tools param file, you can choose the longitude, latitude, the grid definition for the vertical. And you can choose also the path towards the data you want to use and the type of data. For example, if you want to use soda or Mercator or forcing, for example, for the initial and the boundary condition. So fill this CROCO tools param file, and then you can, with MATLAB, prepare your file. So basically for tomorrow morning, if you want to try to build a configuration on a different areas in Benguela, I advise you to go there and to prepare a different configuration. And so for that, you need to launch the start, which is setting all the paths, the MATLAB paths towards the CROCO tools toolbox. Then you have to make the grid, so make grid. And then I will provide you, actually, you will have the access to Mercator file, global files for the year 2013, for the 2 or 3 first months, if I remember well. So you can start preparing your boundary and initial condition with Mercator. So using make OGCM Mercator. You will have to set up some paths to do that in CROCO tools param. I won't explain that now because it's not very, very interesting, but I've put as an appendices of this PDF that I will put on the MOSA website where you can download it, all the steps that I did. So if you want to look at that, you will see all the lines that I have changed to set up a new configuration that I've done actually on the Chiloé. It's funny. I didn't know that you were going to present that, but it's at another resolution. That's funny. Then for WaveWatch, you can use GridGen if you know how to. But otherwise, for first an easy representation, if you want to run WaveWatch with exact same grid than CROCO, you can go into the pre-pro WaveWatch 3 directory, and there we have put some script that helps you build very simply the similar grid as CROCO grid. So there is a make WaveWatch 3 grid input files from CROCO grid. So basically just reading CROCO grid, and it's preparing the files like bathymetry from the CROCO bathymetry, so it's smooth. Remember that because CROCO bathymetry is a bit smooth. And it will give you exactly the same longitude, latitude, etc. So it's preparing the file that you will give to the WaveWatch 3 grid executable to build the grid. You just have to execute that if you are in the coupling script framework. And you can see that you eventually have also some other scripts to prepare a forcing condition. So for tomorrow, you won't need it, but eventually if you want to then later prepare current and level forcing from CROCO to run a WaveWatch only simulation, you can. Then, after doing all this pre-processing, you will have to prepare your run. So what do you need to do? You have a new grid, maybe a different resolution than the Benguela. So you need to compute the time steps for your different models. So I've put some insight. It's also available in the CROCO documentation, but I think it's something to remember. How do you compute the time step for CROCO? So first, you compute the barotropic time step. So it's the part that is moving very fast. So to do so, you have this little constraint, which is the velocity of the waves in deep water. Because if you have, for example, tides or any less waves that affect the full water column, you have to be okay with this constraint. So this is the way to compute it. So here it was done for the Benguela case. But if you have different resolution than 30 kilometers, you have to change this delta x towards your resolution. Obviously, you have to put it in meters. And then you have your barotropic time step. From there, you can check that your baroclinic time step is a number of times this barotropic time step. By default, we put 60, so it will be 60 times 60. And here you can find that for the Benguela case, if you do that, you have a baroclinic time step that is 3,600 seconds. But you have to check if it's fine. Is this baroclinic time step fine? To do so, you have the CFL condition. So the CFL condition is the fact that when you have a motion, an advection motion of your currents, you cannot skip one grid point. You cannot jump from one grid point to another with skipping a node. So because of that, depending on the numerical scheme that you are using, you have different CFL constraints. And here, there are the numbers of this CFL constraint, depending on the schematic that we have in CROCO. So we have different options for advection that you can choose, and you have then different numbers. The default one is UP3, so upstream third order scheme. And so this is here the example that is given. So the maximum CFL number is 0.8071. So then you can check with this formulation that the maximum velocity that is allowed during your CROCO simulation is indeed lower than this number. So I've computed with the 30-kilometer grid that I have and the 3,600 time step that I computed before, that I can have a maximum velocity of the current of 7.25 meters per second, which is a lot. Basically, we'll never have that. So it should work, and your model should not blow up. So you have to check that. If this number becomes too small, you can see that it's not possible. So either you will need to increase the number of barotropic time steps that you have in one baroclinic time step, so increase the baroclinic or decrease the baroclinic time step, or you can decrease this time step or decrease the other. Basically, you have to decrease the time step. Then for WaveWatch 3, so I put here the number that we have as a comment in the coupling script, that I think that Andres gave slightly different numbers, but well, it doesn't, you can try then. The first that you have to compute is also the CFL condition, so the time step for advection. And basically the formulation that gives you that is given there. Depending on your frequency discretization, you can see that basically it's generally between 3 and 4% of delta X. Then once you have this CFL, you can compute the global, which can be 2 or 3 times the CFL. And you can compute also the refraction that is basically half of the global in general. And the source term, we have said that it was between 5 and 60. I put usually 10, but it's depending. This you can change a little. So then what I advise strongly is that you first run the models in fork mode before going to coupling. Because this way, if you have an issue in one of the models, you will see it right away. So basically, to do that, so you have to check at the name list and all the files that are in the model. So basically, everything with the toolbox almost is filled automatically, but not everything. As you have seen on the morning, you can change, for example, the name of the longitude and latitude for the reinforcing in WaveWatch 3. So this is something that you have to do. But for example, you can also need to, eventually you need to change the parameterization setting for WaveWatch 3, and this is done within gridding. So everything that are in the directories and that it is not into brackets in the script, if you want to change it, you have to change it before. starting the simulation. So this is the case for clearance, for grid, for shell. If, for example, you want different variable to output. And similarly in CROCO, if you want to change, if you want just to change the outputs, for example, there are some true/false flag in CROCO.in that you should change in CROCO.in.base, because it won't be changed automatically by the script. Similarly, if you want to change the numerics of the parameterization of the CROCO model, because you have a very special configuration that is requiring different parameterization on numerics than the default one, you have to change it in cppdefs.h.base file, so that can be accounted in the coupling script. The only things that are changed in cppdefs.h are the coupling flags, basically, and the bulk eventually settings. Then you have to edit the usual my name list, my job, with all what we have seen this morning. And then here again, start by doing a Waywatch 3 only simulation, then a CROCO only simulation. And there, first, you will have initial condition for the coupler, which is useful. But you're sure that at least your model alone are working. So you launch the job, you check the logs. I've put back here where you can find the errors if you have some, because it's quite important. So either it will be the jobs _ your experiment directory, where you have the output of the job, or it can be in the run directory in the execute, where you will have all the output from the different models and from the coupler. So basically, I think that all the files that you should look at are written on this page. Then, if everything went well, you will see that in your experiment _ output, you will find some output. And these outputs will be eventually used to prepare this restart file for the coupled simulation that you want to run. So basically, then, if everything is okay, you can prepare the name list and run the coupled experiment. So here again, you change my name list, my job, the usual. Be careful in my job, if you have run something before, be careful with the date and the restart flag, because probably they will be changed already. And then again, submit the job and check off all the logs and outputs. So this is the same, but basically, normally you should be able to do all that. Then I put some slides on typical issues and some suggestions. So first, typical issues, if it's not working, probably there is something wrong in my path, my name list, or my job. And most of the time, it's spelling issues. So probably you have written badly the name of a file. So in the output, in the log, you will find something, file not existing or file is missing. So probably check all these paths. Then you can have inconsistency in the dimension of the grid or the preprocessing. So check that you're okay with your preprocessing files or CROCO, Waywatch, and it's really consistent to what you have prescribed in my name list as a grid size. And there can be some error with the OSIS grid and mask or remapping file. But if you're using the toolbox, normally you shouldn't have too much these errors, because we make sure that we start with clean directory at each time. So generally, it's not an issue. You can have also inconsistency on the variable you want to exchange. So for example, if you have a bad flag for the kind of coupling that you ask, for example, you forget that in my name list you have let OWA, so coupling with 3 models, but then you are asking to couple only CROCO and Waywatch. So you have put 1 for CROCO, 1 for Waywatch, but 0 for WARF. It will start reading the name list for the 3 models and it says, oh, I'm not finding some of the variables. So basically, it's because you have also an issue in my name list on how you prescribe the coupling. And then you can have blow up. So each model can blow up, and this is generally due to a bad time step. So check on your time step, and I've said a bit earlier how to compute them, but sometimes in some configuration, the CFL can be met easily, the model can become unstable and stuff like that. So if you have an issue with blow up, basically decrease your time step, keep sure that the time step has still multiple of each other and multiple of the coupling frequency, otherwise you will have a problem, obviously. But start decreasing the time step, and if you are not managing to solve this issue, maybe check at your domain, because, for example, if you put the boundary of your domain in the middle of very strong bathymetry filters, maybe it will be very difficult for the model to manage that, and it will become unstable at each time. So this is typically true for work. For example, if you put your boundaries in the middle of the Andes, generally it's never working. Okay, but it can be also true with WaveWatch. I've never seen it blow up, I guess. It's super stable, but CROCO, you can, if you start putting the boundary in a trench or something like this, it can become unstable. So in this case, or a strange mask feature close to the coastal area. So in this case, just change a little the position of the boundary, and it should be solved. So you have to reprocess everything, by the way. And then some good practices to prepare new simulation. So this, I think, is quite important. So basically, when you build a new configuration, you should follow some steps. So first, you have to design, obviously, the grid and the resolution according to what you want to study. And I advise you, there is no need for going up to the higher resolution if it's not needed. So go to the resolution or design your experiment with the resolution that you need to look at the process that you want. It's not always the good solution to put a super high resolution, because sometimes it's not necessary and it gives you a lot of complication in what you want to do. Then for the simulation, you need a spin-up generally, because if you are prescribing initial and boundary conditions that are not at the same resolution and they come from a different model, you need to let your model adjust. So for example, if you are using boundary conditions that are of low resolution for the ocean, initial condition, and you're working at a mesoscale resolving resolution in your domain, then you have to let a spin-up, to do a spin-up so that your model starts developing mesoscale features and stuff like that. Otherwise, the first period of time that you will see in your model are useless to study, because it's just spin-up of the run. Basically, for the ocean, it really depends on the size of your region and on the resolution that you have, on the process you want to study. For example, if you have a global scale and you want to study the thermoline circulation, the spin-up should be huge. If it's a smaller area and you have already initial or boundary conditions that are relatively high resolution, it can be a bit shorter. And for waves, generally, it's quite fast, because waves are generated by local winds or eventually distant storms, and they propagate quite fast. So generally, for example, for global simulation, what I do in WaveWatch is a 15-day spin-up, so you can see that it's quite short. Then, on the technical aspects, I would say it may be interesting to first run your simulation, even if it's relatively high resolution, at a lower resolution, because it's faster and because you can make sure that your couple of technical steps are okay. So model compilation, etc. And so you're not waiting for hours that your run is running because you have super high resolution. No, start with a low resolution. Okay, it's not that bad. I'm not in a strange area up to the mountain and stuff like that. It's running. Okay. Then run the models in force mode, as I said, before going to coupling. And finally, maybe it's quite important, so before launching a long simulation, you should launch short simulations and test the performance and the runtime of your model. So you have to decide how many CPUs you will allocate to each model. And when you are running couple simulation, as you saw a bit earlier, for example, with WARF is super slow compared to CROCO and WaveWatch, for example, for the same resolution, because the time step is really shorter. Then it's important to run a few days of each model and to understand how long it takes to run these few days, depending on the number of CPUs that you have prescribed, to have a good load balance between the CPUs and really be of high performance on the computer you're working on. Okay, and this you can also use some software that are profiling your code and stuff like that. But basically, if you don't know this kind of software, at least run some short simulations, some tests on how many CPUs you allocate, check the time it takes, and then you're ready to run really a bigger simulation. Otherwise, you will spend many times running stuff that you will never use and will restart. So basically, and I think that's it. So as I said, as appendices there, I won't go there, but I have put all the steps. So you can use that tomorrow morning. I think it's an example on one part of Chile, but you can do whatever you want to run your own case.
Muchas gracias, Sol. Vamos a apagar.